The rain lashed against the windows of Naval Station Newport like a furious ocean trying to reclaim the land. Even in early March, Rhode Island's weather showed no mercy, turning the base into a gray, sodden landscape that matched the mood inside. Tactical Operations Center. By 0800, the storm had settled into a persistent downpour that veteran sailors recognized as the kind that wouldn't burn off by noon. The kind that seeped into your bones and stayed there, a constant reminder that nature always had the final say. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Commander Eliza Morgan stood under the shelter of the administration building's awning, watching personnel dash between buildings with hunched shoulders. No umbrella in her hand, just a weatherproof duffel slung across her back and a set of orders that had raised eyebrows all the way from the Pentagon to this rain-soaked corner of the Atlantic Fleet's training hub. She wore standard-issue Navy blues that had seen real sea spray, not the pristine uniforms of officers who spent their careers behind desks. Everything about her seemed unremarkable at first glance. Average height, auburn hair pulled back in a regulation bun, stance relaxed, but alert. What wasn't average was the way she observed her surroundings. Her gray-blue eyes methodically scanned entry points, personnel movements, and security measures with the practiced assessment of someone who'd learned that situational awareness wasn't just a training manual term, it was survival. The security officer at the entrance barely looked up from his monitor, just nodded toward the visitor's log with the bored efficiency of someone who'd checked in hundreds of transfers and couldn't care less about one more. Eliza signed her name with quick, precise strokes and continued into the building, her footsteps silent despite the standard-issue boots. She'd been awake since 0400, reviewing personnel files and memorizing the facility layout from her temporary quarters. The cramped officer's lodging smelled faintly of industrial cleaner and damp carpet, the universal scent of military accommodations worldwide. But she'd slept in far worse conditions, and comfort had never been her priority. Her service record sat open on the small desk in her quarters, the official Navy photograph paperclip to the front showing a younger version of herself, more formal, less weathered. The commendations listed in black and white told only part of the story. The rest remained locked in classified files and in the memories of teams who had served with her in waters too dangerous or politically sensitive to acknowledge. This morning, she had studied her orders once more, though she had memorized them days ago. Special Warfare Training Division, Naval Station Newport, Tactical Operations Instructor. Effective immediately. The transfer had come without warning and without explanation, just the way most significant changes happened in her world. The rumors had undoubtedly preceded her. They always did. Inside the administration building, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a harsh glow that made everyone look slightly ill. Two senior instructors lounged near the coffee station, one scrolling through his phone with exaggerated boredom, the other arranging papers with the meticulousness of someone avoiding real work. Their conversation paused when Eliza entered, followed by the subtle assessment that military personnel gave to newcomers, a quick visual inventory that categorized and dismissed her in seconds. "Can I help you?" Phone guy didn't look up, his tone suggesting he hoped the answer was no. Eliza approached the desk, her posture comfortable but perfectly aligned. "Commander Eliza Morgan reporting for assignment. I'm scheduled to meet with Captain Reynolds at 0830. The man finally looked up, his expression shifting from boredom to poorly concealed surprise. "You're the new tactical instructor." "That's correct." She handed over her orders without further elaboration. The second man, older with cropped silver hair and the weathered face of a career sailor, took the paperwork and reviewed it with exaggerated thoroughness. His nameplate read Williams, Senior Chief Instructor. "Says here you're supposed to take over advanced maritime interdiction operations." Williams looked up, skepticism evident in every line of his face. That's Peterson's division. He's been running it for 3 years. I go where I'm ordered, Senior Chief, Eliza replied, her voice neutral but firm. The two men exchanged glances that spoke volumes, the universal look of established hierarchy confronted with unwelcome change. Eliza had seen it before, had weathered it in different variations across 2 decades of service. Well, Captain Reynolds is still in his morning briefing, Williams said, sliding her paperwork back across the desk. Might be a while. You can wait over there. He gestured to a row of plastic chairs against the wall. Eliza retrieved her orders and moved to the designated waiting area. She didn't pull out her phone or fidget with impatience. Instead, she sat with the composed stillness that came from countless hours on watch, in observation posts, and on operations where movement meant detection and detection meant failure. Through the large windows, she could see the training facilities in the distance, obstacle courses partially obscured by rain, the outline of the tactical training building, and beyond that, the gray Atlantic churning with whitecaps. This would be her domain now, for reasons that remained classified even to her. After years of operational deployment, the sudden transfer to an instructional role had caught her off guard, though her expression had remained neutral when she'd received the orders. So that's her, she heard one of the instructors mutter. Voice low but not low enough, the Ice Queen. Heard she got sideways with naval intelligence over that operation in the Persian Gulf. This is probably a shelf assignment until they figure out what to do with her. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Training division doesn't need this kind of disruption. Peterson's got everything running smoothly. Eliza gave no indication she'd heard them, though she hadn't missed a word. The nickname wasn't new. It had followed her through multiple commands, sometimes spoken with respect, other times with resentment. The speculation about her transfer was predictable. Military personnel filled information vacuums with theories, and her abrupt reassignment without public explanation was prime material for conjecture. The door to the inner offices opened, and a stream of officers emerged, their conversation dying as they noticed the unfamiliar figure waiting. Captain Thomas Reynolds, the division commander, appeared last. He was tall with the broad shoulders of a former football player now softening with age and desk duty, but his eyes remained sharp and assessing. "Commander Morgan," he said without preamble, "in my office." She rose and followed him, feeling the stares of the instructors boring into her back. The whispers would spread quickly. New tactical instructor, female, unexpected replacement for a well-liked division head. By lunch, the entire training facility would be buzzing with speculation, most of it unflattering. Reynolds' office was military standard functional desk, regulation plaques and certificates on the walls, a window overlooking the training grounds. He gestured to a chair and closed the door before taking his own seat. "I received your transfer orders yesterday," he began, leaning back and studying her. No explanation, just a directive from Naval Special Warfare Command with all the appropriate signatures. "Care to fill in the blanks?" "Sir, I go where I'm ordered," Eliza replied, the same answer she'd given Williams. Reynolds' expression hardened slightly. "Let's cut the formalities, Commander. I've run this training division for 8 years. I know every instructor by name, their capabilities, their limitations. I don't appreciate having one of my senior instructors replaced without consultation or explanation." "I understand, sir." Her voice remained even. "If it helps, this assignment was as unexpected for me as it is for you. Your record is—" He glanced down at the file on his desk, impressive but heavily redacted. "Naval Special Warfare. Riverine Squadron 3. Multiple deployments with Joint Special Operations Task Forces. Combat decorations that aren't specified." He looked up. And yet here you are, assigned to train recruits in basic maritime operations. Advanced maritime interdiction operations, sir, she corrected mildly. According to my orders. A hint of a smile touched Reynolds' mouth. Yes, advanced. Still seems like a waste of whatever experience earned you those redactions. Eliza met his gaze directly. I'm sure Naval Special Warfare Command has its reasons, Captain. I'm sure they do. He closed the file. Here's how this works, Commander. You'll shadow Peterson for 1 week before taking over. You'll adhere to our established curriculum and training protocols. Any changes you want to implement come through me first. This is a training facility, not a combat zone. Understood, sir. The quarters you've been assigned are temporary. Permanent officer housing will be available next month. He paused, studying her. One more thing. My instructors are a tight-knit group. They work well together. They respect each other's expertise. You're coming in as an outsider replacing someone they trust. That won't be easy. It never is, sir, she said simply. Reynolds nodded, apparently satisfied with her response. Report to the Tactical Training Center at 0900. Peterson will be expecting you. He stood, signaling the end of the meeting. Welcome to Newport, Commander Morgan. Thank you, sir. She rose and left his office, moving through the administration building with the same quiet efficiency that characterized all her movements. Outside, the rain had intensified, driven sideways by wind gusting off the Atlantic. Eliza pulled up the collar of her jacket and walked toward the Tactical Training Center, a large warehouse-like structure near the waterfront. Her mind processed the interaction with Reynolds, cataloging his concerns, assessing his leadership style, identifying the challenges ahead. The rumors about her reassignment weren't entirely wrong. The operation in the Persian Gulf had achieved its objectives, but the political fallout had been substantial. Someone needed to take responsibility for decisions made under fire, and as team leader, that responsibility fell to her. She'd accepted it without protest, just as she accepted this assignment now. Inside the Tactical Training Center, the atmosphere was humid and smelled of sweat and neoprene. Training pools for water insertion techniques occupied one section. Mock-ups of ship corridors and compartments another. A group of instructors clustered near the main pool, watching trainees practice underwater maneuvers. Their conversation died as she approached, replaced by the professional silence of people waiting to take the measure of someone new. A stocky man with a shaved head and the perpetual tan of someone who lived outdoors stepped forward. Commander Morgan, Lieutenant Commander James Peterson. His handshake was firm, perfunctory. Captain Reynolds called ahead. Commander Peterson. She nodded acknowledgement. We're running the trainees through basic underwater navigation, he explained, gesturing toward the pool. Standard curriculum for week 6. Eliza watched the trainees working in pairs, noting their technique, identifying weaknesses in their approach. How many fail at this stage? About 30%, Peterson replied. Mostly due to navigation errors or buddy system breakdowns. She nodded, continuing her assessment. The other instructors had resumed their duties but kept glancing in her direction. Their body language communicated everything their words didn't: wariness, curiosity, and the territorial response to a perceived intruder. I'll show you the facility, then you can observe today's training sessions, Peterson said, his tone professional but distant. Tomorrow you can start working with some of the trainees directly. As they walked through the training center, Peterson explained the curriculum, the assessment protocols, the training schedule. His expertise was evident, his command of the material thorough. Eliza listened, asked relevant questions, and absorbed the information with the focused attention that had characterized her entire career. This is my office, Peterson said, indicating a small room off the main training floor. I suppose it'll be yours soon. The statement carried no resentment, just a simple acknowledgement of reality. We can share it during the transition, she suggested. No need to disrupt operations. He looked at her with mild surprise, as if he'd expected something different. That's reasonable, thank you. By midday, word of her arrival had spread throughout the facility. Instructors and trainees alike found reasons to pass by, to glimpse the newcomer who was replacing the well-respected Peterson. The whispers followed her, fragments of rumor and speculation. Heard she got a whole team killed in some classified operation. Pentagon's dumping her here until retirement. They call her the Ice Queen because she left wounded teammates behind. Eliza heard it all and acknowledged none of it. She'd learned long ago that military rumors were like weather, constantly changing, impossible to control, and best endured with stoic indifference. During lunch in the officers' mess, she sat alone, systematically working through her meal while reviewing training materials on her tablet. The isolation wasn't new. Leadership often meant solitude, and she'd grown comfortable with it over the years. A young female lieutenant hesitated near her table, then gathered her courage and approached. Commander Morgan? Lieutenant Sophia Chun, hydrographic intelligence instructor. Eliza looked up. Lieutenant, I just wanted to introduce myself. Chun shifted her weight slightly, betraying nervousness. I've heard about your work with the riverine squadrons. It's an honor to meet you. Something in Chun's earnest expression prompted Eliza to soften her usual reserve. Thank you, Lieutenant. How long have you been at Newport? Just 6 months, ma'am. First teaching assignment after 3 years with the 5th Fleet. Eliza gestured to the empty chair across from her. Join me if you'd like. Chun sat, her posture still formal. People are talking, ma'am, about why you're here. People always talk, Lieutenant. It rarely changes anything. They don't know about the medals, do they? Chun asked quietly. Eliza's expression remained neutral, but her attention sharpened. What medals would those be, Lieutenant? The Navy Cross, ma'am, and the others. Chun met her gaze directly. My brother served with Riverine Squadron, 3-2 deployments after yours. The stories still circulate. For a moment, Eliza was silent, reassessing the young officer before her. Stories tend to grow with each telling, Lieutenant. Yes, ma'am, Chun nodded. But some things don't need embellishment to be impressive. The conversation shifted to training protocols and Chun's experiences with the 5th Fleet. When they finished lunch, Eliza found herself appreciating the lieutenant's straightforward manner and intelligent observations. It had been a while since she'd connected with a junior officer so easily. Thank you for the company, Lieutenant, she said as they prepared to leave. My pleasure, Commander. Chun hesitated. May I offer some unsolicited advice? Eliza raised an eyebrow but nodded. They're testing you, the senior instructors. They've worked with Peterson for years. Trust his judgment. They'll resist any changes, question your decisions. Chun squared her shoulders. But they respect results. If you can improve trainee performance, they'll come around. Noted, Lieutenant. Eliza studied the younger woman thoughtfully. Is that what you did? A smile flickered across Chun's face. Still working on it, ma'am. But my trainee failure rate is down 15% from last year. Impressive, Eliza acknowledged. I'll keep your advice in mind. The afternoon continued with more facility tours and curriculum review. By 1800, most instructors had departed, leaving the training center quiet except for a few determined trainees practicing in the pool area. Eliza remained in Peterson's office, systematically working through personnel files and training evaluations. The pattern was clear. Peterson ran an efficient program with acceptable results. The trainees who completed his course were competent in standard maritime interdiction procedures. But the failure rate was higher than necessary, and the training scenarios hadn't been updated to reflect current operational realities. She made notes, identified areas for improvement, and began drafting a revised training schedule. The clock on the wall showed 2,100 hours when she finally gathered her materials and prepared to leave. The training center was deserted now, the pool still, the overhead lights dimmed in nighttime settings. Her footsteps echoed slightly as she walked toward the exit. Outside, the rain had finally stopped, leaving behind puddles that reflected the security lights and a clean, salt-tinged breeze blowing in from the ocean. As she walked toward the officers' quarters, Eliza found herself thinking about Lieutenant Chun's comment. The medals. They were packed away in her personal effects, along with the citations that explained why they'd been awarded. She never displayed them, never mentioned them. They represented moments of crisis and decision, not achievements to be celebrated. The Navy Cross rested in its case alongside the Silver Star and the Bronze Star with Combat VFs, physical representations of classified operations and split-second decisions that had saved lives but ended others. The weight of those decisions never diminished, never became easier to carry. They were part of her now, as much as the scars that marked her body beneath her uniform. In her temporary quarters, Eliza unpacked her laptop and connected to the secure server, entering her clearance codes to access the classified briefing materials that had accompanied her transfer orders. The real reason for her reassignment wasn't punishment or political fallout, though that narrative served as convenient cover. The screen displayed a series of intelligence reports, surveillance photos, intercepted communications, threat assessments. A new operational pattern was emerging in multiple theaters: sophisticated maritime attacks targeting naval and commercial vessels, executed with tactics that suggested specialized training. Her orders became clear as she read through the material. Naval Special Warfare Command needed the next generation of tactical operators trained specifically to counter these emerging threats. Newport's maritime interdiction program would be the foundation, but it needed to be completely overhauled, updated with lessons from the field that existed only in the minds of operators like her. She wasn't being sidelined. She was being positioned exactly where the Navy needed her expertise most. The realization brought a grim satisfaction. This wasn't a punishment assignment. It was perhaps the most important mission of her career. Eliza closed the files and secured her laptop. Tomorrow would be the first full day of her new command, and the resistance would be substantial. The instructors would question her methods, undermine her authority, test her resolve at every opportunity. It was the natural response to change, especially change imposed from outside. She had faced worse, much worse, and prevailed. This challenge would be no different. As she prepared for bed, she glanced at her duffel bag, still mostly packed. Inside, wrapped in a protective cloth, was the small wooden box containing her medals. Perhaps it was time to change her approach. Sometimes, authority needed to be visibly established before it could be effectively exercised. For the first time in years, Commander Eliza Morgan considered wearing her full decorations, not out of pride or need for recognition, but as a tactical decision, a way to cut through the rumors and establish the credibility needed to accomplish her mission. The thought was still with her as she drifted to sleep. The sound of the Atlantic waves breaking against the shore, a familiar lullaby that had accompanied her through deployments across the world's oceans. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but she would meet them as she had met all others, with preparation, precision, and the quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly what she was capable of achieving. Morning came with clearing skies and the distinctive sounds of a military base coming to life, the distant cadence of running formations, the mechanical rumble of service vehicles, the rhythmic precision of daily routines that kept the complex machinery of naval operations functioning. Eliza woke before her alarm, a habit formed through years of pre-dawn operations and watch rotations. Her morning routine was efficient: physical training, shower, uniform preparation, all executed with the same methodical attention she applied to every aspect of her life. The decision she'd contemplated the night before remained at the forefront of her mind as she dressed. The box containing her medal sat open on the small desk, the decorations gleaming softly in the morning light, filtering through standard-issue blinds. She rarely wore them, had never seen the need to announce her accomplishments through visible symbols. Her authority had always come from competence rather than credentials. But Newport was different. The whispers and speculation had preceded her, creating a narrative she needed to counter effectively if she was to accomplish her mission. In tactical operations, the direct approach was sometimes the most effective, particularly when facing entrenched resistance. With decisive movements, she affixed the medals to her uniform, the Navy Cross, the Silver Star, the Bronze Star with Combat V, and the others that collectively told the story of a career spent in the shadows of naval special warfare. The weight was unfamiliar after so long, but not unwelcome. It reminded her of the responsibility that came with command, with experience, with the trust of those who had served alongside her. The officers' mess was crowded when she arrived, filled with instructors and staff preparing for the day's training schedule. Conversations faltered as she entered, replaced by the subtle silence of collective assessment. She felt the eyes tracking her, noted the expressions shifting from curiosity to surprise as they registered the decorations on her uniform. "Commander," Captain Reynolds nodded as she passed his table. His gaze dropped briefly to the medals, then returned to her face with new understanding in his eyes. "I'd like to see you in my office after breakfast." "Yes, sir," she replied, continuing to the serving line. Lieutenant Chun was already seated at a corner table, reviewing notes while she ate. Her eyes widened slightly when she spotted Eliza, a quick smile of approval crossing her face before she composed her expression again. "May I join you, Lieutenant?" Eliza asked, stopping beside Chun's table. "Of course, Commander." Chun quickly made space, moving her materials aside. As Eliza sat, she noticed Peterson and several other senior instructors watching from across the room, their expressions a mixture of surprise and reassessment. The Navy Cross, in particular, had created the intended effect. It was an unmistakable statement of combat experience and leadership under the most challenging conditions. "Bold move, ma'am," Chun commented quietly, nodding toward the decorations. "Sometimes the direct approach is necessary," Eliza replied. "How are the hydrographic intelligence trainees progressing?" They discussed training matters through breakfast, Chun providing valuable insights into the current class's strengths and weaknesses. Eliza listened carefully, identifying potential areas for integration with her planned tactical training revisions. When she entered Captain Reynolds' office, 30 minutes later, his manner had shifted subtly from their previous meeting. The wariness remained, but it was now accompanied by a different kind of assessment, the evaluation one combat veteran gives another. "The Navy Cross," he said without preamble. "Persian Gulf? Yes, sir." I read the unclassified summary. "Doesn't tell much of the story." "Most of it remains classified, Captain." Reynolds nodded, understanding the limitations of what could be discussed. "Why didn't you wear it yesterday?" Eliza considered her response carefully. "I prefer to establish authority through performance rather than decoration, sir. But given the circumstances of this assignment, I reconsidered." A slight smile touched the captain's face. "Tactical decision?" "Yes, sir." "Well, it's had the desired effect. Half the instructors are looking up your service record as we speak." He leaned back in his chair. "I did some checking myself after our meeting yesterday. What's publicly available is impressive enough. What I imagine is redacted." He let the sentence hang unfinished. "Sir, about the training program," Eliza redirected the conversation. "I've reviewed the curriculum and have some recommendations." Reynolds nodded, accepting the change of subject. "Let's hear them." For the next 20 minutes, she outlined her assessment, the strengths of the current program, the areas requiring modernization, the new threats that trainees needed to be prepared to counter. She presented her analysis with the precise clarity that had characterized her mission briefings throughout her career, identifying problems and proposing solutions without assigning blame. When she finished, Reynolds was silent for a moment, considering her recommendations. "This is a substantial overhaul, Commander. Peterson has built this program over years. The program has solid foundations, sir. But the operational environment has evolved. Our training needs to reflect current realities. And you believe you're the one to implement these changes?" "I've been ordered to do so, Captain." She met his gaze directly. "And yes, I believe I'm qualified." Reynolds studied her for another moment, then nodded decisively. "Proceed, Commander. Keep me informed of your progress. Peterson won't like this, but he's a professional. He'll adapt." "Thank you, sir. One more thing, Morgan." Reynolds' expression turned serious. "Those medals you're wearing, they tell me you've made hard decisions in combat situations. Decisions that saved lives and accomplished missions under extraordinary circumstances. I respect that, but this is a training command. Your decisions here affect the next generation of operators. The stakes are different, but no less important." "Understood, sir. That's precisely why these changes are necessary." He dismissed her with a nod, and Eliza left his office with the authorization she needed to begin reshaping the maritime interdiction program. The real work would begin now, convincing the instructional staff to embrace changes to methods they'd been teaching for years. At the Tactical Training Center, she found Peterson briefing the morning's instructors, outlining the day's training schedule and objectives. Their conversation stopped abruptly when she entered, eyes immediately drawn to the decorations on her uniform. "Commander Morgan," Peterson acknowledged her, his tone professionally neutral, but his expression revealing surprise. "We were just reviewing today's schedule. Please continue, Commander Peterson." She moved to join the group, noting the shifted dynamics in the room. The dismissive attitudes of the previous day had been replaced by a wary respect, not acceptance yet, but the beginning of reassessment. Peterson resumed his briefing, detailing the training scenarios planned for each group of trainees. When he finished, Eliza addressed the assembled instructors. "I've spent the last 18 hours reviewing the current training program," she began, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had commanded special operations teams in combat zones. "It's evident that Commander Peterson has built a solid foundation for maritime interdiction training. The basics are sound." Peterson's posture relaxed slightly at the acknowledgement, and several instructors nodded in agreement. "However," she continued, "the operational environment has evolved significantly. The threats our trainees will face in the field are more sophisticated, more tactically advanced than what we're currently preparing them for." The atmosphere in the room shifted, instructors exchanging glances, some defensive, others curious. "The trainees aren't ready for this level of complexity." "No," she agreed. "They're not. That's precisely the point." By 0800, the instructors had gathered for their morning briefing, their reactions to the modified training area ranging from skepticism to concern. Eliza stood before them in her working uniform, the medals absent now that they'd served their purpose. Today wasn't about credentials, it was about demonstration. "Today's exercise will deviate significantly from standard protocol," she began without preamble. "I'll be playing the opposing force. The trainees will attempt to execute their interdiction as planned. My role is to demonstrate the gaps in their preparation." "What exactly are the parameters, Commander?" asked Chief Ramirez, one of the more experienced instructors. "Are you simulating a specific threat scenario?" "I'm simulating reality, Chief," Eliza replied. "Asymmetric opposition with knowledge of our standard operating procedures. No artificial limitations, no predetermined outcomes." Unease rippled through the group. Training exercises typically followed scripted scenarios with clear boundaries and safety protocols. What she was proposing sounded dangerously unstructured, Sir, Ramirez addressed Peterson, standard safety protocols will be maintained. Eliza interrupted firmly. No live weapons, no actual combat techniques, but the tactical challenge will be authentic. These trainees need to understand that the field doesn't follow our training manual. Peterson studied her for a moment, then nodded. Commander Morgan has my authorization for this exercise. Safety observers will maintain their standard positions. All normal abort protocols remain in effect. The instructors exchanged glances, but offered no further objections. The medals might be absent from her uniform today, but their memory lingered in the room, lending weight to her unorthodox approach. At 0900, the trainees assembled outside the tactical area, equipment checked, and ready, expressions revealing a mixture of confidence and apprehension. They'd spent the evening discussing her challenge, developing alternative approaches, preparing for non-standard scenarios. But nothing in their preparation had anticipated the complete reconfiguration of the training environment. Listen up. Peterson addressed them. Today's exercise has been modified by Commander Morgan to reflect current operational realities. Your objective remains the same: secure the vessel, neutralize hostile elements, extract the package. But the conditions have changed significantly. He paused, letting them absorb the seriousness of his tone. Commander Morgan will be acting as the opposing force. Treat this as a real-world scenario, not a training exercise. The trainees straightened, nervousness replaced by focused determination. This was no longer routine training. It was a challenge issued by a decorated combat veteran. Questions? Eliza asked. A young ensign raised his hand. Commander, are you using the same rule set we are? Standard training protocols? A small smile touched her lips. When you board a hostile vessel in contested waters, ensign, does the opposition follow your rule set? No, ma'am. Neither will I begin your pre-mission briefing. You have 20 minutes to plan your approach. As the trainees huddled to reassess their strategy, Eliza prepared for her role. She removed her uniform blouse, replacing it with a nondescript black tactical shirt. No insignia, no identifiable markings, just like the maritime threats emerging across the globe's critical waterways. Lieutenant Chun approached as she was making final preparations. Permission to observe, Commander, Eliza nodded. You might find it instructive, Lieutenant. She paused, studying the younger officer. Your brother, what's his current assignment? 5th Fleet Security Detachment, Chun replied. He's been tracking these new threat patterns you're simulating. The confirmation of her suspicions was subtle but clear. Naval intelligence was connecting the same dots that had led to her reassignment. He's seen action then. Yes, ma'am. 2 interdiction operations in the last 6 months, he says. Chun hesitated, checking for potential listeners. He says they're unlike anything in the training protocols. Adaptive, sophisticated, almost like they know our playbook. They do, Eliza said quietly. That's what today is about. At the 10-minute mark, she slipped into the modified vessel mock-up through a maintenance access point not visible from the trainee's position. Inside, she moved with practiced silence to her starting position, not where the standard exercise would place the opposing force, but in a blind spot that would allow her to observe the initial entry without being detected. Through the observation system, she heard Peterson give the final briefing. Standard safety protocols remain in effect. Exercise weapons only. Commander Morgan will be using non-standard tactics, but physical engagement is limited to training. Parameters. The trainees nodded their understanding, completed their equipment checks, and moved into position. Their approach was cautious but followed textbook patterns. Primary team covering the main access point, secondary team moving to the alternate entry. Communication protocols, exactly as taught in the training manual. Eliza watched their deployment with the critical eye of someone who had executed these operations for real. against adversaries who shot back with live ammunition. The trainees were well trained in standard procedures, their movements coordinated and precise. But standard procedures were exactly what made them vulnerable. When the primary team breached the main access point, she remained motionless in her concealed position. They entered efficiently, clearing zones according to protocol, moving through the vessel with practiced coordination. They were halfway through their search pattern when she made her first move. Using the blind spots in their coverage, she slipped between their teams, positioning herself behind the command element. In a real operation, this would be the moment when tragedy struck, when overconfidence and adherence to predictable patterns created fatal vulnerabilities. "Boom," she said quietly, directly behind the team leader. The young officer froze, then turned slowly to find her standing less than 2 feet away, training weapon aimed at his center mass. "Ma'am, your entire team is dead, Lieutenant," she said calmly. "You followed standard entry protocols against an opponent who knows those protocols. In a real operation, I would have detonated explosives as soon as you established your entry pattern." The other team members stared in shock. They had cleared the vessel according to procedure, maintained proper security positions, executed textbook communication protocols. And yet somehow, she had maneuvered behind their command element undetected. "Exercise pause." Peterson's voice came over the communication system. "All elements hold position." He entered the mock-up, surveying the scene with a practiced eye. What he saw told the whole story, the trainees in textbook positions, Eliza standing in the one location their security pattern had failed to cover. "Explain what happened," he instructed the team leader. The lieutenant swallowed hard. We followed standard entry procedures, sir. Cleared each compartment according to protocol. I don't understand how. You don't understand because you've never faced an opponent who studied our procedures," Eliza interrupted, her voice firm but not unkind. "You executed the textbook approach perfectly. That's exactly why you failed." Confusion showed on the trainees' faces, the cognitive dissonance of being told their perfect execution was the reason for their failure. "Reset," Peterson ordered. "Full exercise restart in 15 minutes. As the trainees filed out to regroup, he turned to Eliza. That was illuminating. "It's just the beginning," she replied. "The real threat is more sophisticated than what I just demonstrated." "These kids are following the procedures we taught them," he said, concern evident in his voice. "If those procedures make them vulnerable, then we need to teach them new procedures," she finished. "Procedures that incorporate unpredictability, adaptability, awareness of countertactics." Peterson nodded slowly, the full implications of her demonstration sinking in. "This isn't just about updating the training program. This is a fundamental shift in our approach to maritime interdiction." "Yes," she confirmed. "That's why I'm here." The second attempt went marginally better. The trainees, shaken by their initial failure, attempted to modify their approach. They varied their entry points, altered their search pattern, maintained tighter communication. But they were still working within the framework of their training, still following modified versions of procedures designed for environments that no longer existed. Eliza exploited different vulnerabilities this time, using their communications against them, creating distractions that divided their attention, manipulating their expectations. The result was the same, a training team neutralized without ever knowing what hit them. By the third attempt, frustration had replaced confidence. The trainees huddled in intense discussion, discarding textbook approaches entirely, trying to develop something unique. When they re-entered the mock-up, their approach was noticeably different, improvised, unpredictable, but also uncoordinated and inefficient. Eliza let them progress further this time, observing their adaptation with professional interest. They were learning, beginning to understand the nature of the challenge. But improvisation without structure led to its own vulnerabilities. When she finally made her move, it was to exploit the gaps in their hastily constructed plan. Exercise complete, Peterson called after the third failure. Debriefing in 30 minutes. The trainees left the training area silent and subdued, their confidence shattered by repeated failure against a single opponent. They had entered the exercise believing themselves prepared for real-world operations. Now they understood how dangerously mistaken that belief had been. In the debriefing room, they sat awaiting Eliza's assessment, expressions ranging from dejection to grim determination. She stood before them, her posture relaxed but her gaze intense. "Today was difficult," she began, acknowledging what they all felt. "You executed your training precisely as taught. In previous operational environments, that would have been sufficient. But the maritime threat landscape has evolved." She activated the room's display screen, showing sanitized footage from actual interdiction operations. These clips are from actual encounters within the past 6 months. Study the opposition. Tactics carefully. The trainees watched with rapt attention as the screen showed encounters with vessel crews, who demonstrated sophisticated counter-tactics, who anticipated standard naval procedures and prepared specific countermeasures. The parallels to their morning failures were unmistakable. "This isn't random," Eliza continued. "These opposition elements have studied our procedures, identified patterns, and developed specific countermeasures. What you experienced this morning is what our operational teams are encountering with increasing frequency." A hand raised. Ensign Chun, no relation to the lieutenant but equally perceptive. "Commander, how do we counter an adversary who knows our playbook?" "We write a new playbook," Eliza replied simply. "One based on adaptability rather than fixed procedures. One that incorporates unpredictability as a core principle. One that assumes the opposition has studied our standard approaches and prepared accordingly." She moved to the front of the room, her expression serious but not without compassion. "I'm not here to replace Commander Peterson because he's failed in any way. I'm here because the operational environment has changed, and our training needs to change with it." Peterson nodded from his position at the back of the room, publicly endorsing her statement. "Starting tomorrow," she continued, "we're implementing a revised training program. It will be challenging. It will force you to unlearn some of what you've been taught. It will push you beyond what you currently believe possible. But it will prepare you for the actual threats you'll face, not the ones that existed when your training manual was written." The room was silent as they absorbed her words. Then slowly, Ensign Chun spoke again. "Thank you, Commander, for showing us the truth before we learned it the hard way." A murmur of agreement spread through the group, dejection giving way to renewed determination. They had been humbled, but also enlightened. The painful lessons of the morning had opened their eyes to realities they needed to face. "Dismissed," Eliza concluded. "Rest today. Tomorrow will demand everything you have." As the trainees filed out, Peterson approached her, his expression thoughtful. "That was more effective than I anticipated. They needed to understand the stakes," she replied. "Real-world failure isn't a teaching moment. It's a casualty report." "The instructors were watching through the observation system," he said. "Your demonstration made an impression. They're waiting in the conference room if you're ready to address them." Eliza nodded, mentally shifting gears from trainee instruction to the potentially more challenging task of instructor conversion. The trainees might be more malleable, but the instructors were the ones who would ultimately implement and sustain the program changes. The conference room fell silent as she entered. 7 senior instructors seated around the table, their expressions guarded but attentive. These were experienced operators, most with combat deployments and years of instructional experience. Their buy-in was essential to the program's transformation. "Gentlemen," she began, taking her place at the head of the table, "what you witnessed this morning is a simplified version of what our operational teams are facing in multiple theaters. The Threat has evolved. Our training must evolve with it. Chief Ramirez leaned forward, his weathered face serious. With respect, Commander, I've been teaching tactical maritime operations for 8 years. The fundamentals don't change. The fundamentals of hydrodynamics don't change, Chief, she acknowledged. The fundamentals of weapons employment don't change, but tactics evolve constantly, especially when facing an adaptive adversary. She activated the room's display, showing the same operational footage she'd shared with the trainees, plus additional classified material cleared for instructor-level viewing. This is from the Persian Gulf 3 months ago. Standard interdiction. Operation, experienced team, by the book approach. The footage showed a boarding team following textbook procedures, right until the moment when everything went catastrophically wrong. Opposition members appearing from concealed positions, employing counter-tactics that anticipated the team's movements, creating chaos where there should have been controlled precision. 4 casualties, she said quietly as the footage ended. 2 critical, mission failure. All because the opposition knew exactly what to expect and had prepared accordingly. The room was silent, the instructors processing the implications of what they'd just witnessed. This wasn't theoretical. It wasn't an academic exercise in updating curriculum. It was life and death for the operators they were training. I was there, she continued, her voice matter of fact. I was part of the QRF that extracted that team. What you just saw is why I'm here now. Understanding dawned in their expressions. This wasn't a routine reassignment or a career sideline. It was a mission-critical response to an emerging threat. The program revisions I'm proposing aren't arbitrary, she continued. They're based on direct field experience against these new threats. They incorporate lessons paid for in blood. She distributed tablets containing the overview of her proposed training revisions, not abstract concepts, but specific tactical modifications, updated procedures, new approach methodologies. The instructors studied the materials with growing interest, professional curiosity overcoming initial resistance. This is comprehensive, Chief Ramirez acknowledged, scrolling through the tactical updates. You've been developing this for some time. Since the operation you just witnessed, she confirmed. Naval Special Warfare Command has been tracking these emerging threats across multiple theaters. The pattern is clear and concerning. Someone is systematically training maritime opposition elements in counter-tactics, specifically designed to exploit our standard procedures. The implications hung in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone in the room. This wasn't random adaptation. It was coordinated, professional, potentially state-sponsored counter-training. The trainees you saw this morning aren't ready for what they'll face in the field, Eliza continued. That's not their fault, and it's not yours. It's simply the reality of an evolving threat environment. Our job now is to adapt faster than the opposition, to develop tactics they haven't already countered. One by one, the instructors began to engage, asking questions, suggesting modifications, applying their expertise to the challenge she'd laid before them. The initial resistance was giving way to professional problem-solving, to the natural response of experienced operators confronted with a legitimate threat. By the session's end, the mood had transformed. What had begun as skepticism had evolved into cautious collaboration. They weren't fully convinced yet, but they were engaged, their professional interest captured by the challenge she'd presented. We'll review these materials in detail and reconvene tomorrow morning, Chief Ramirez concluded, speaking for the group. In the meantime, I think we all have some thinking to do about how we've been approaching our instruction. As the instructors filed out, Peterson remained behind, waiting until the room had cleared before speaking. You've given them a lot to process. Too much? She asked, genuinely interested in his assessment. He considered the question carefully. No, they needed the full picture. They're professionals, They'll adapt once they understand the stakes. He paused, studying her with new respect. The footage from the Gulf operation. That's where you earned the Navy Cross, isn't it? Eliza met his gaze steadily. The citation is classified, Commander. Of course. He nodded, understanding. The non-answer for what it was. I just want to say, I'm glad you're here. Not because I wanted to be replaced, but because these kids deserve the best preparation we can give them. The admission reflected the professional integrity she'd sensed in him from the beginning. Personal pride subordinated to mission requirements and trainee welfare. Your experience will be essential to this transition, Commander Peterson. I'm not here to discard what works, only to update what doesn't. Partners, he reminded her, extending his hand once more. Partners, she agreed, shaking it firmly. As Peterson left, Eliza remained in the conference room, reviewing notes from the morning's exercise and preparing for the program revisions that would begin tomorrow. The initial demonstration had been necessary but insufficient. The real work lay ahead, transforming an entire training methodology to prepare operators for threats they'd never seen before. A light knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Lieutenant Chun stood in the doorway, tablet in hand, expression serious. Lieutenant, Eliza acknowledged. Something on your mind? Chun entered, closing the door behind her. Ma'am, I've been reviewing the operational footage you shared with the instructors. You have clearance for that material? Yes, ma'am. Hydrographic intelligence specialty includes threat assessment. Chun hesitated, then continued. I noticed something in the Persian Gulf footage that wasn't mentioned in the briefing. Eliza's attention sharpened. Go on, the opposition tactics. They're not just counter procedures. They incorporate elements of our own advanced techniques. Techniques that aren't in any published manual. Chun's expression was troubled. It's as if they were trained by someone intimately familiar with our most current operational methods. That's a concerning observation, Lieutenant, Eliza said carefully, neither confirming nor denying. It's why you're really here, isn't it? Chun persisted. Not just to update training, but to identify the source of the leak. Eliza studied the younger officer thoughtfully. Chun's analysis was perceptive, perhaps too perceptive for someone at her rank and position. Those conclusions exceed your clearance level, Lieutenant. Yes, ma'am. Chun accepted the rebuke without argument, but her expression remained resolute. I just want you to know. If you need intelligence support beyond what's formally assigned to you, I'm available. The offer was professionally risky, volunteering, for involvement in what was clearly a sensitive counterintelligence matter. It spoke to either remarkable dedication or personal investment in the outcome. Why? Eliza asked simply. Chun met her gaze directly. Because my brother nearly died in an interdiction operation 3 months ago. Because whatever's happening out there is getting good operators killed. And because I believe you were sent here to stop it. The assessment was uncomfortably accurate. Eliza's assignment to Newport wasn't merely about updating training protocols. It was part of a broader counterintelligence operation to identify the source of leaked tactical information, a source that Naval Intelligence believed was connected to the training command. I appreciate your offer, Lieutenant, she said. Carefully, for now, focus on your assigned duties. But keep your observations to yourself. Chun nodded, understanding the subtext. Yes, ma'am. After the lieutenant departed, Eliza secured the conference room and updated her encrypted notes. On the day's events, the demonstration had achieved its primary objective, establishing her tactical credibility and beginning the process of training reformation. But Chun's unsolicited analysis highlighted the sensitivity of her broader mission. Someone at Naval Station Newport had access to classified tactical information. Someone was potentially feeding that information to hostile maritime elements. And identifying that someone was the unspoken component of her assignment, the part that couldn't be acknowledged in briefings or discussions with the training staff. As evening approached, she made her way to the officers' mess, aware of the changed dynamics her morning demonstration had created. The whispers continued, but their nature had transformed, from skepticism about her presence to speculation about what she'd shown the trainees. The medals had opened the door, but her demonstration of tactical expertise had truly established her authority. The next 3 days unfolded with the relentless intensity of a carefully orchestrated campaign. Eliza's revised training program upended every aspect of the maritime interdiction curriculum, replacing predictable routines with adaptive methodologies that emphasized situational awareness and tactical flexibility. The trainees, initially overwhelmed by the new approach, gradually began to embrace the challenge, their failures becoming less frequent, their adaptations more effective. On the 4th morning, Eliza arrived at the Tactical Training Center before dawn, as had become her habit. The facility was silent and dimly lit, the training equipment arranged precisely as she'd left it the previous evening. She moved through the space with practiced efficiency, preparing for the day's exercises while mentally reviewing the progress of individual trainees. "You're here early, Commander." Captain Reynolds' voice came from the doorway, surprising her. He rarely visited the training center, especially at this hour. "Good morning, sir." She straightened from adjusting a training sensor. "Final preparations for today's exercise." Reynolds entered, surveying the modified training environment with professional interest. "I've been reviewing the daily reports. Impressive progress in a short time." "The trainees are adapting well," she acknowledged. "They have the foundational skills. They just needed a different framework for applying them." He nodded, continuing his inspection of the training area. "And the instructors? How are they?" "Adapting to your methods?" "Professionally," she replied. "Initial resistance has largely been replaced by engagement. They understand the necessity now." Reynolds stopped his circuit, turning to face her directly. "Peterson submitted his updated evaluation yesterday. He's remarkably supportive of your program changes. Says you've identified vulnerabilities that have been overlooked for years." "Commander Peterson is an excellent instructor," Eliza said. "He cares more about preparing these trainees properly than defending established methods." "Yes, he does." Reynolds studied her thoughtfully. "That's what makes his endorsement significant. Peterson isn't easily impressed." Something in his tone suggested there was more to this conversation than a simple progress check. Eliza waited, allowing the silence to draw out whatever the captain had really come to discuss. "I received a call from Naval Special Warfare Command yesterday," he finally continued. "Admiral Calloway sends his compliments on the program revisions." The mention of Admiral Calloway, the officer who had signed her transfer orders, confirmed that this was no routine visit. "The Admiral is well informed about our progress." "Yes, he is." Reynolds' expression remained carefully neutral. "He mentioned that your assignment here has multiple objectives." And there it was, the acknowledgement that her mission extended beyond training reform. "Sir, some aspects of my assignment remain classified." "I understand that, Commander." Reynolds lowered his voice slightly, though they were alone in the facility. "I'm not asking for details, I'm offering support. Whatever your secondary objectives might be, this is my command. I should be informed of operations occurring within it." Eliza considered her response carefully. Reynolds deserved transparency, but her operational parameters were strict. "Sir, I can confirm that my presence here involves more than curriculum. Updates. Beyond that, I'm not authorized to brief you at this time." Reynolds nodded, accepting the limitation. "Fair enough. But let me be clear, Commander. If you're conducting counterintelligence operations on my base, I expect to be brought into the loop before any action is taken." "Understood, sir." He studied her for another moment, then changed direction. "The trainees are responding well to your methods. The instructors respect your expertise. You've accomplished in 4 days what might have taken another officer months." He paused. I'm beginning to understand why Admiral Calloway selected you for this assignment. Thank you, sir. Carry on, Commander. I'll expect a full briefing when you're authorized to provide one. After Reynolds departed, Eliza continued her preparations with renewed focus. The captain's visit confirmed what she'd suspected. Higher command was watching her progress closely, not just with the training reforms, but with the counterintelligence operation as well. The pressure to produce results on both fronts had just increased significantly. By 0800, the trainees had assembled for the day's exercise, their demeanor noticeably different from 4 days ago. Where there had been cocky confidence followed by dejected failure, now there was focused determination. They moved with purpose, communicated efficiently, and approached each challenge with the adaptive mindset she'd been cultivating. Today's scenario incorporates all the elements we've been practicing separately. She briefed them, standing before the tactical display. Asymmetric opposition, counter-surveillance measures, non-standard access points, and adaptive security. Protocols. Your objective remains the same: secure the vessel, neutralize hostile elements, extract the package. She studied their faces, noting the absence of anxiety that had characterized earlier briefings. They weren't afraid of failure anymore. They had learned to see it as information, as an opportunity to adapt and improve. Questions? She asked. Ensign Chun raised his hand. Commander, will you be playing opposition force again today? No. Ensign, today you'll face a team of instructors who have been briefed on the new opposition tactics. This is as close to a real-world scenario as we can create in a training environment. Over the next week, I'll be introducing modifications to the training scenarios to better reflect current operational realities. Commander Peterson's expertise will be essential in this transition. I expect all instructors to contribute their knowledge and experience as we update our approach. With respect, Commander, one of the senior instructors spoke up. We've maintained a successful completion rate with our current methods. Changing established protocols mid-course could disrupt trainee progress. Your concern is noted. Chief, Eliza replied. But I would rather disrupt training here than send unprepared operators into the field. The purpose of this facility isn't to maintain completion rates. It's to prepare maritime operators for the threats they'll actually face. The chief fell silent, recognizing the irrefutable logic of her statement. I'll be observing all training sessions today, she continued. Tomorrow we'll begin implementing the first modifications. Are there any questions? The room remained silent, the instructors processing the implications of her announcement. It wasn't acceptance yet, but it was a beginning, the first step. In the transition from resistance to collaboration. Dismissed, she concluded. Let's get to work. As the instructors dispersed to their assignments, Peterson remained behind, his expression thoughtful as he regarded the decorations on her. Uniform, Navy Cross, he said quietly. I didn't know. It wasn't relevant to my assignment, she replied. With respect, Commander, it's entirely relevant. He met her gaze directly. It tells me you've been there, made the hard calls under fire. That changes things. Does it? It means you're not just another Pentagon officer with theories about how things should be done. A hint of respect had entered his voice. You've actually done them. Eliza considered his words carefully, recognizing the shift they represented. The training modifications I'm proposing come from field experience. Commander Peterson. Some of it very recent. Understanding dawned in his eyes. This isn't a punishment assignment. No, she confirmed. It's not. Peterson nodded slowly, reassessing everything he'd assumed about her arrival. You'll have my full cooperation. Commander, but my instructors will need convincing. They trust my judgment because they've seen me in action. Then they'll need to see me in action as well, Eliza said simply. Which is exactly what I intend to demonstrate. The morning proceeded with Eliza observing training sessions, making notes, and occasionally asking questions of the instructors. By lunch, the initial tension had evolved into professional curiosity. The metals had opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed, creating opportunities for engagement rather than resistance. During the afternoon tactical exercise, a simulated interdiction of a hostile vessel, she watched from the observation platform as the trainees moved through their practiced routines. Their techniques were textbook correct but predictable, lacking the adaptability needed for real-world operations against thinking adversaries. "Permission to address the trainees, Commander Peterson?" she asked as the exercise concluded. He nodded, curious about what she intended. Eliza descended to the training floor where the tired trainees were gathered for debriefing. They straightened to attention as she approached, eyes flickering to the decorations on her uniform. "At ease," she said, surveying the group. "You executed the standard interdiction protocol correctly. In a controlled training environment, that's sufficient. In the field, against an adversary who knows our standard procedures, it will get you killed." The blunt assessment caught their attention, uncertainty replacing satisfaction in their expressions. "Tomorrow," she continued, "we're going to run this scenario again, but I'll be playing the role of the opposing force. I suggest you review non-standard approaches tonight, because I promise you, what worked today will fail tomorrow." A ripple of nervous energy passed through the trainees, followed by renewed focus. They had been challenged, their assumptions questioned by someone whose decoration said she knew exactly what she was talking about. "Commander Morgan," one of the trainees ventured, "what specifically should we be preparing for?" Eliza allowed a small smile. "In the field, your adversaries don't issue warning orders, Ensign. Neither will I dismissed." As the trainees filed out, discussing her challenge in urgent whispers, Peterson approached her, a new respect evident in his manner. "You're going to embarrass them tomorrow," he observed. "Yes," she agreed. "Better here than in combat." "And the instructors? Are you planning to embarrass us as well?" She met his gaze directly. "That depends, Commander. Are you willing to adapt, or are you committed to methods that are no longer aligned with operational realities?" Peterson considered her question seriously. "I've spent 3 years building this program. It's effective by every metric the Navy uses to evaluate." "Training, it was effective," she corrected gently. "The metrics haven't caught up to the changing threat environment yet, and you've seen this new environment firsthand." It wasn't a question. Yes. The single word carried the weight of experiences that couldn't be detailed in an unsecured training facility. Peterson nodded slowly. "Then I want to learn what you know, Commander. Not just for my sake, but for these trainees who are counting on us to prepare them properly." It was the response of a true professional, ego subordinated to mission requirements, personal pride set aside in service to the greater purpose of their work. Eliza felt a new respect for the man she was replacing, recognizing in him the same dedication that had driven her own career. "That's exactly what I needed to hear, Commander Peterson." She extended her hand. "Partners in this transition?" He shook it firmly. "Partners." The day ended with a new understanding established between them, not friendship yet, but professional respect that could serve as its foundation. As word spread through the instructor cadre that Peterson was cooperating with the changes, the atmosphere shifted from resistance to cautious acceptance. By evening, Eliza had finalized her plans for the next day's demonstration. It would be challenging, possibly controversial, but necessary to establish both her credibility and the urgent need for training modernization. The metals had opened the door. Now her actions would have to justify the authority they represented. In her quarters that night, she reviewed the classified briefing materials again, studying the patterns of the new maritime threats emerging across multiple theaters. The tactics were sophisticated, adaptive, and clearly designed by someone with intimate knowledge of naval special warfare procedures. Tomorrow would be the first step in preparing a new generation of operators to counter these threats. It would also be her first real test as the new tactical instructor. The moment when respect derived from decorations would need to be replaced by respect earned through demonstrated expertise. Eliza closed her laptop and prepared for bed, mentally rehearsing the scenarios she planned to execute. Tomorrow would determine whether her reassignment would be the career sideline many assumed or the critical mission she knew it to be. The weight of that responsibility was familiar, comfortable even, the same weight she'd carried through years of operations where failure wasn't an option. As she drifted towards sleep, she found herself thinking about Lieutenant Chun's words. At lunch, they respect results. It was true in special operations, and it would be true here as well. Tomorrow she would deliver those results, and the real work of transformation could begin. Dawn broke over Naval Station Newport with the crisp clarity that follows a storm. The air held that particular freshness unique to coastal military installations. Salt spray mixed with the mechanical precision of a base coming to life. By 0600, Eliza was already in the Tactical Training Center, reconfiguring equipment for the morning's demonstration. She'd arrived before any instructors or trainees, using the solitude to prepare the scenario that would reshape their understanding of maritime threats. The training area had been transformed overnight. The standard vessel mock-up now featured subtle modifications, different access points, improvised barriers, unexpected angles of approach. She'd repositioned the surveillance cameras to create blind spots and introduced environmental factors that would complicate the trainees' practiced routines. Everything was designed to replicate the conditions of an actual hostile interdiction, not the sanitized training scenarios they'd grown accustomed to. At 0700, Peterson arrived, stopping short when he saw the altered training environment. His eyes narrowed as he assessed the changes, mentally calculating their implications for the exercise. This is significantly different from our standard configuration, he observed, walking the perimeter of the mock vessel. You've eliminated the primary entry point entirely. Hostiles adapt, Eliza replied simply. They study our tactics, identify patterns, prepare countermeasures. We need to prepare our trainees for that reality. Peterson nodded slowly, continuing his inspection. These modifications are comprehensive. You did this alone? I've had practice, she said, making a final adjustment to one of the barriers. This is a simplified version of something I encountered in the Strait of Hormuz last year. Understanding flickered in Peterson's eyes, the first concrete reference she'd made to her operational experience. Excellent question, Ensign. The answer is that you prepare not for specific threats, but for the process of adaptation itself. You develop not tactical procedures, but tactical thinking. She moved to the front of the room, her expression intense. In my experience, the most dangerous moment in any operation isn't when things go according to plan, nor when they go completely wrong. It's the moment when they go slightly wrong, when the deviation is subtle enough that you continue following your original plan despite evidence that it's no longer valid. The trainees leaned forward, recognizing the truth in her words from their own limited experiences. You train yourselves to recognize those moments, she continued, to identify when adaptation is necessary before the situation deteriorates beyond recovery. That awareness, that willingness to abandon the plan when the situation demands it, is what separates experienced operators from casualties waiting to happen. The ensign nodded, understanding dawning in his expression. So it's not about having the right answer for every situation. Precisely, Eliza confirmed. It's about having the right process for finding answers in any situation. That's what we're really teaching here. The debriefing continued with specific tactical analysis, but the philosophical foundation had been established. These weren't just trainees learning procedures anymore. They were operators developing a tactical mindset that would serve them across countless unforeseen scenarios. By day's end, the training center buzzed with energized discussion. The successful Exercise had transformed the atmosphere from cautious adaptation to enthusiastic engagement. Instructors who had initially resisted Eliza's methods were now proposing refinements and extensions, contributing their expertise to the evolving curriculum. As the facility emptied for the evening, Eliza remained in the shared office, updating training assessments and planning the next day's exercises. Peterson had departed an hour earlier, called away to a meeting with the administration staff, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the growing evidence of a security breach within the command. Lieutenant Chun's data analysis had narrowed the transmission origin point significantly, but still encompassed an area used by multiple instructors and support staff. More concerning was the timing. The transmissions occurred during hours when the facility should have been vacant, suggesting deliberate after-hours access by someone with authorization. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Chief Ramirez stood in the doorway, his weathered face serious. "Got a minute, Commander?" "Of course, Chief." She gestured to the chair across from her. "What can I do for you?" He entered but remained standing, his posture communicating discomfort with what he'd come to discuss. "Ma'am, I've been at Newport for almost a decade. Seen instructors come and go, training methods evolve, priorities shift with different commands." Eliza waited, allowing him to find his way to the point at his own pace. "What you've done with the training program in less than a week," he continued, "it's not just an update. It's a complete paradigm shift, and it's necessary. I see that now." "I appreciate the acknowledgement, Chief." He shifted his weight slightly, still uncomfortable. "That's not why I'm here, ma'am. I'm here because something isn't right in this command, and I think you know what it is." Eliza's expression remained neutral, but her attention sharpened. "Explain, Chief." 3 months ago, training materials started changing. Small adjustments to tactical procedures, modifications to interdiction protocols. Nothing that would raise alarms, just updates. Then 2 months ago, we started hearing about operational failures in the 5th Fleet AOR, maritime interdiction teams, encountering opposition that seemed to anticipate their every move. He paused, gauging her reaction. "Now you show up with a Navy Cross and orders to overhaul our entire training program. And you're not just changing procedures, you're changing the entire approach, making it unpredictable, adaptive." "Your point, Chief?" she prompted, though she already knew where this was heading. "My point, Commander, is that you're not just here to update training. You're here because someone in this command is compromising operational security. Someone is passing our tactics to hostile maritime elements." The assessment was remarkably accurate, too accurate for comfortable coincidence. Eliza studied the chief carefully, assessing his possible motivations for this approach. "That's a serious allegation, Chief Ramirez." "Yes, ma'am, it is." He met her gaze directly. "And based on your reaction, I'd say it's an accurate one." Eliza made a decision. Ramirez had been at Newport longer than any other instructor, knew the personnel better than anyone else in the command. If there was a security breach, his insights could be invaluable. But trust had to be verified, especially in counterintelligence. Operations. "Chief, what makes you think I would be involved in anything beyond training reforms?" "With respect, Commander, I've been around long enough to recognize a counterintelligence operation when I see one. The way you're compartmentalizing information, your careful examination of personnel patterns, your after-hours facility inspections." So he'd noticed her evening investigations. "Interesting. And you're bringing this to me because—" "Because I want it stopped," he said simply. "Whatever's happening, whoever's involved, they're putting operators at risk. That's not acceptable." His directness was refreshing, but caution remained necessary. "I appreciate your concern, Chief. If such an operation were taking place, your observations would be valuable." He nodded, accepting the non-confirmation for what it was. "Just so you know, Commander, I've served with everyone on this staff for at least 2 years. They're good people, dedicated instructors. If one of them is compromised, it's not because they turned. It's because they were turned. The distinction was important. Motivation mattered in counterintelligence operations. Someone who betrayed operational security for ideology was different from someone manipulated through other vulnerabilities. Noted, Chief. Is there anything else? He hesitated, then committed. Peterson's been accessing the facility after hours, 3 times in the past week. Doesn't log his entry. Doesn't file reports on whatever he's doing. It's not like him. He's usually by the book on administrative matters. The information landed like a physical blow. Peterson had been her closest ally in the training reforms, had embraced her methods more completely than any other instructor. If he was the source of the breach, how do you know about these entries, Chief? Because I've been watching the facility at night, ma'am. Ever since the operational failures started. Figured if something was happening here that shouldn't be, it would happen after hours. His initiative was either commendable or concerning, depending on his motivations. Does anyone else know you've been conducting this surveillance? No. Ma'am, kept it to myself until I was sure something was happening, and until I was sure you were here to stop it. Eliza considered her options carefully. Ramirez had just provided valuable intelligence, but incorporating him into the operation carried risks. I appreciate the information, Chief. For now, maintain your normal routine. If you observe anything else unusual, report directly to me, not through the chain of command. Understood, Commander. He turned to leave, then paused. Whatever's happening, ma'am, it needs to end. Our people deserve better. After Ramirez departed, Eliza sat motionless, processing the implications of this new information. Peterson's unauthorized access aligned perfectly with the transmission timing Chun had identified. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Her closest ally in the training reforms might be the very security breach she'd been sent to identify. But something didn't fit. Peterson's enthusiastic embrace of her training modifications directly contradicted the actions of someone passing tactical information to hostile elements. Why would he support changes that would render the compromised procedures obsolete? Unless the support itself was tactical, a way to maintain cover while continuing to access updated procedures. It was a sophisticated approach, one that suggested professional intelligence training rather than opportunistic betrayal. The tactical problem was now clear, but the solution remained complex. She needed definitive proof before taking action, especially against someone as respected as Peterson. And she needed to understand the motivation, the why behind the breach, not just the how. As darkness settled over Naval Station Newport, Eliza prepared for a different kind of operation. Tonight, she would need to confirm Ramirez's intelligence, verify the transmission pattern Chen had identified, and determine whether Peterson was indeed the source of the security breach that had cost operators their lives halfway around the world. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Excellent question, Ensign. The answer is that you prepare not for specific threats, but for the process of adaptation itself. You develop not tactical procedures, but tactical thinking. She moved to the front of the room, her expression intense. In my experience, the most dangerous moment in any operation isn't when things go according to plan, nor when they go completely wrong. It's the moment when they go slightly wrong, when the deviation is subtle enough that you continue following your original plan despite evidence that it's no longer valid. The trainees leaned forward, recognizing the truth in her words from their own limited experiences. You train yourselves to recognize those moments, she continued, to identify when adaptation is necessary before the situation deteriorates beyond recovery. That awareness, That willingness to abandon the plan when the situation demands it is what separates experienced operators from casualties waiting to happen. The ensign nodded, understanding dawning in his expression. So it's not about having the right answer for every situation. Precisely, Eliza confirmed. It's about having the right process for finding answers in any situation. That's what we're really teaching here. The debriefing continued with specific tactical analysis, but the philosophical foundation had been established. These weren't just trainees learning procedures anymore. They were operators developing a tactical mindset that would serve them across countless unforeseen scenarios. By day's end, the training center buzzed with energized discussion. The successful exercise had transformed the atmosphere from cautious adaptation to enthusiastic engagement. Instructors who had initially resisted Eliza's methods were now proposing refinements and extensions, contributing their expertise to the evolving curriculum. As the facility emptied for the evening, Eliza remained in the shared office, updating training assessments and planning the next day's exercises. Peterson had departed an hour earlier, called away to a meeting with the administration staff, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the growing evidence of a security breach within the command. Lieutenant Chun's data analysis had narrowed the transmission origin point significantly, but still encompassed an area used by multiple instructors and support staff. More concerning was the timing. The transmissions occurred during hours when the facility should have been vacant, suggesting deliberate after-hours access by someone with authorization. A soft knock interrupted her concentration. Chief Ramirez stood in the doorway, his weathered face serious. "Got a minute, Commander?" "Of course, Chief." She gestured to the chair across from her. "What can I do for you?" He entered but remained standing, his posture communicating discomfort with what he'd come to discuss. "Ma'am, I've been at Newport for almost a decade. Seen instructors come and go, training methods evolve, priorities shift with different commands." Eliza waited, allowing him to find his way to the point at his own pace. "What you've done with the training program in less than a week," he continued, "it's not just an update. It's a complete paradigm shift, and it's necessary. I see that now." "I appreciate the acknowledgement, Chief." He shifted his weight slightly, still uncomfortable. "That's not why I'm here, ma'am. I'm here because something isn't right in this command, and I think you know what it is." Eliza's expression remained neutral, but her attention sharpened. "Explain, Chief." 3 months ago, training material started changing. Small adjustments to tactical procedures, modifications to interdiction protocols. Nothing that would raise alarms, just updates. Then 2 months ago, we started hearing about operational failures in the 5th Fleet AOR, maritime interdiction teams, encountering opposition that seemed to anticipate their every move. He paused, gauging her reaction. "Now you show up with a Navy Cross and orders to overhaul our entire training program. And you're not just changing procedures, you're changing the entire approach, making it unpredictable, adaptive." "Your point, Chief?" she prompted, though she already knew where this was heading. "My point, Commander, is that you're not just here to update training. You're here because someone in this command is compromising operational security. Someone is passing our tactics to hostile maritime elements." The assessment was remarkably accurate, too accurate for comfortable coincidence. Eliza studied the chief carefully, assessing his possible motivations for this approach. "That's a serious allegation, Chief Ramirez." "Yes, ma'am, it is." He met her gaze directly. "And based on your reaction, I'd say it's an accurate one." Eliza made a decision. Ramirez had been at Newport longer than any other instructor, knew the personnel better than anyone else in the command. If there was a security breach, his insights could be invaluable. But trust had to be verified, especially in counterintelligence. Operations. "Chief, what makes you think I would be involved in anything beyond training reforms?" "With respect, Commander, I've been around long enough to recognize a counterintelligence operation when I see one. The way you're compartmentalizing information, your careful examination of personnel patterns, your after-hours facility inspections. So he'd noticed her evening investigations. Interesting. And you're bringing this to me because I want it stopped, he said simply. Whatever's happening, whoever's involved, they're putting operators at risk. That's not acceptable. His directness was refreshing, but caution remained necessary. I appreciate your concern, Chief. If such an operation were taking place, your observations would be valuable. He nodded, accepting the non-confirmation for what it was. Just so you know, Commander, I've served with everyone on this staff. For at least 2 years. They're good people, dedicated instructors. If one of them is compromised, it's not because they turned. It's because they were turned. The distinction was important. Motivation mattered in counterintelligence operations. Someone who betrayed operational security for ideology was different from someone manipulated through other vulnerabilities. Noted, Chief. Is there anything else? He hesitated, then committed. Peterson's been accessing the facility after hours, 3 times in the past week. Doesn't log his entry. Doesn't file reports on whatever he's doing. It's not like him. He's usually by the book on administrative matters. The information landed like a physical blow. Peterson had been her closest ally in the training reforms, had embraced her methods more completely than any other instructor. If he was the source of the breach, how do you know about these entries, Chief? Because I've been watching the facility at night, ma'am. Ever since the operational failures started. Figured if something was happening here that shouldn't be, it would happen after hours. His initiative was either commendable or concerning, depending on his motivations. Does anyone else know you've been conducting this surveillance? No. Ma'am, kept it to myself until I was sure something was happening, and until I was sure you were here to stop it. Eliza considered her options carefully. Ramirez had just provided valuable intelligence, but incorporating him into the operation carried risks. I appreciate the information, Chief. For now, maintain your normal routine. If you observe anything else unusual, report directly to me, not through the chain of command. Understood, Commander. He turned to leave, then paused. Whatever's happening, ma'am, it needs to end. Our people deserve better. After Ramirez departed, Eliza sat motionless, processing the implications of this new information. Peterson's unauthorized access aligned perfectly with the transmission timing Chun had identified. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Her closest ally in the training reforms might be the very security breach she'd been sent to identify. But something didn't fit. Peterson's enthusiastic embrace of her training modifications directly contradicted the actions of someone passing tactical information to hostile elements. Why would he support changes that would render the compromised procedures obsolete? Unless the support itself was tactical, a way to maintain cover while continuing to access updated procedures. It was a sophisticated approach, one that suggested professional intelligence training rather than opportunistic betrayal. The tactical problem was now clear, but the solution remained complex. She needed definitive proof before taking action, especially against someone as respected as Peterson. And she needed to understand the motivation, the why behind the breach, not just the how. As darkness settled over Naval Station Newport, Eliza prepared for a different kind of operation. Tonight, she would need to confirm Ramirez's intelligence, verify the transmission pattern Chen had identified, and determine whether Peterson was indeed the source of the security breach that had cost operators their lives halfway around the world. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.